Welcome to the Dunk City Podcast.
Change direction by Matthews for the pass and final play. Ellis hits it. Boogie Ellis has been this show. It is a Trojan tundra. USC is on to the Sweet 16 for the first time since 2000.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the premiere episode of the Dunk City Podcast. I'm your co-host, Chris Houston. My other co-host, Mark Backstrom, will be along in just a second. We're about 5 months away from the start of the 2023-2024 season. If you're like me, you're really excited about the prospects for the Trojans this year, and we hope you come along for the ride as we talk Trojan basketball all season long. If you get a chance to review us on Spotify or any of the places where you stream podcasts, give us a good review. We'd appreciate it. Of course, USCbasketball.com is the only website on the internet that is devoted solely to USC basketball. There are some other sites out there that do talk about USC basketball, but they talk about other sports as well and other subjects. But we like to focus only on Trojan basketball, and that's what we're going to do here as well. Okay, it's been a very busy offseason for USC. There's been a lot of worry out there that USC wouldn't be able to get all the players it needs to fill out its roster. And I think what a lot of people need to understand now is that it's going to be very hard in this day and age of the transfer and with so many players clamoring for playing time and such competition for playing time out there to fill all 13 spots on the roster. And so we've got 11 players heading into this season. Looks like this is going to be the amount of players we have for this year, and that's okay. We do have 2 roster spots empty, but USC made some big moves. Of course, we all know about Isaiah Collier, the number 1 player in the country, coming in from Marietta, Georgia. Wheeler High. He's a big, strong point guard, number 1 player. Consensus. There's been a couple spots where he's dropped to number 2, but I'd say the overall consensus is that he's the number 1 guy. There's also Arrington Page, his teammate, who's a big 6'9", very skilled power forward. He kind of reminds me a lot of Chimezie Metu in his skill set. His offensive game will probably need to do a lot of work on defense and get stronger, but he's a very exciting prospect. And then, of course, the one everyone's talking about, Bronny James, the son of LeBron James, who is a 5-star prospect in his own right, played very well at the McDonald's All-Star game, and he is the kind of guy who can shoot from outside and D up, and he's going to give USC an outside presence, which I think USC very much needs. And then lastly, we were able to get a transfer to come into the USC. There's been some complaints in some quarters that we would not be able to get a transfer, but USC did get a transfer, and it's DJ Rodman, the son of Dennis Rodman. These incoming players plus the returning players will be going to Europe this summer, August 5th through 15th, playing in Greece and Croatia. I think they're going to be playing 3 exhibition games against probably some club teams there in Greece and Croatia. Should be a really exciting time. I went to a similar excursion back in 2019 when the Trojans went to France and Spain. I was able to see Onyeka Okongwu playing up close in a really hot, cramped French gym in the south of France, in front of friends and family. So it was a great chance for the team to build up some camaraderie and have some fun together. And I think this year it probably won't be friends and family so much as much larger crowds, considering Bronny James will be in tow. And it's time to bring on our co-host here at the Dunk City Podcast. Mark, tell us a little bit about your background with USC.
Yeah, I graduated from USC in 1992 from the School of Accounting. I'm a CPA with an active license, amateur applied mathematician in my spare time, as I like to say. Love numbers, love college sports. I'm probably one of the most dedicated USC basketball fans you know. I been going since probably about 91. The year I graduated was the year that I'll just say Harold Miner's last year, just to keep it a little positive.
What a year that was. I think for a lot of people who are USC basketball fans, the minor years were sort of these formative kind of influential years that turned them into just diehard fans. And I used to tell people that as big of a USC football fan that I was, I would always say that my favorite USC team of all time in any sport was that team, because there were so many interesting and fun and magical moments, to be sure. So one of the really exciting elements of this podcast, and actually of USCbasketball.com as a whole, is the addition of Mark's analytics that he has developed proprietarily for USCbasketball.com. He has developed a system that will rank USC players, the USC team, in a way that I think will really intrigue a lot of listeners and a lot of readers of the website. We're really hoping to give people more reason to read the website, and Mark's efforts here are a huge part of it. So, Mark, let's go over what are these elements in your ranking system? What are, like, say, the main 2 or 3 categories?
Yeah, I've got 2 main metrics. The first one I call BPO 100.
BPO 100.
Yes, BPO stands for buckets per opportunity. Then I multiply it by 100 just for comparability stakes. So instead of looking at 0.511 versus 0.499, which doesn't seem significant, you have 51 versus 49. Makes it a little more comparable.
Right.
There will be a more detailed explanation about this in what I call some footnotes to the podcast on the website. So if you're not catching this all real time, you don't have to pull the car over and take notes. You can just check this out later. But big picture, this is just saying for every opportunity, how many buckets is a player responsible for.
So BPO is 1.
BPO. And that's basically saying if they score a bucket, if they, every 2 points they score. So it rewards good free throw shooting, good 3-point shooting. If they create a turnover, there's going to be a little bit of a minus, and we'll get to that in a moment. And we just take that over the total opportunities. And all of Division I, the average BPO is about 48. USC was at 49.4. Just for random reference, the top Power 5 or Power team was Gonzaga at 55.8.
Well, that's a really fascinating metric. So Gonzaga is 55.8, USC is 49. So just to give an idea of like how much separation that is, where does Connecticut land in between them?
Yeah, Connecticut is at a 52.2. So actually they're about halfway between. Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting. So really you just need to, just for the sake of last year, being around 52 was enough to win a national title. Okay, what's the next metric that's kind of sticks out for you?
So BPO is more of an efficiency metric, and the other one I wanted to was more of a cumulative metric, kind of an analog to baseball's wins above replacement. I call this BUSCAR. Stands for...
How do you spell that?
BUSCAR.
Okay.
So the BUS is from buckets. The C is from created. A, above. So buckets created above. Instead of replacement, I went with Rico, as in Rico Hines, former UCLA great, ?
The great Rico Hines. Amazing. From the Steve Lavin era.
Yes.
Blast from the past.
And Buscar also is Spanish for to seek, which kind of works here because every coach is seeking more offense.
Right.
And again, it's a cumulative statistic. So it's saying for every opportunity the total opportunities that a player has had over a period of time, how many more buckets has that player created versus Rico or the replacement? Right. Rico's shorter. It's more fun to say. Okay,
now with these analytics in mind, let's talk a little bit about the roster changes that we're seeing right now. We've lost a few players from last season. Malik Thomas is one. He went to USF. Reese Dixon-Waters has gone over to San Diego State. Drew Peterson has graduated. Trey White has transferred over to Louisville. And Yaroslav Niagu is transferred. I forgot where he ended up. I think
Charlotte.
Charlotte, that's right. I knew it was back east. So he's gone. Let's talk about just kind of like what USC is losing from the perspective of your metrics with those guys' departure. Starting with
the two who ranked towards the bottom, Thomas and Yagu, they actually ranked 11th and 12th in both BPO 100.
Overall on the team, you mean?
Overall on the team, yeah, pardon me. And BUSCAR. Yagu actually had a negative BUSCAR, so he couldn't keep up with Rico, poor guy.
Who can?
Yeah, well said. So their departures make sense. Then kind of moving up the rankings, Reese Dixon-Waters, this surprised me. His BPO was only 43, and the team, as I mentioned earlier, was at a 49. He ranked 9th on the team in BPO 100, which was shockingly low when I ran this, but it makes sense. He was just not the same shooter as he was the prior year. His BPO dropped about 5 or 6 points from the prior season. He actually ranked 6th on the team in BUSCAR with 40. And that's, again, a surprisingly low number. The average on the team was 74. And literally a third of that BUSCAR was in that one awesome game he had at Poly Pavilion where I think he missed only one shot.
So he had 3 years at USC, and I think it's pretty fair for him to say, hey, look, it hasn't really happened for me how I wanted it to happen, and now Boogie's back again, and Isaiah Collier's coming in, and at the time he thought Silas Demery Jr., and who knew in this kind of era of college basketball, he didn't know who else was going to come in, and obviously he was a guy who the coaches, they had to. I don't feel like the kind of guys who were going to get on him much verbally, but he had to have sensed their disappointment.
I think so. And I think he might have just put a little pressure on himself. The way he started the season as a starter just was not, a starting caliber player. And that seemed to just kind of put his brain in the wrong spot for most of the season, it seemed like. There's
also sort of a misalignment with fans now and how they perceive kind of the timetable for players and how players perceive their timetables. And because of the realities of college basketball, you're just not going to have a full 13 scholarships anymore. Guys don't want to come to your program and be the 12th or 13th player. So they leave until they find a place where they're not the 12th or 13th, where they're like the 5th or the 6th or 7th at least, at worst. And so what ends up is you end up having 2 extra scholarships all the time. And I'm sure this is going to happen in a lot of places because you're going to have some rare situations, Harrison Hornery, guys who come in who are like obviously being practical about the situation and are they like it there? They have a genuine desire to be at the program. But I think a lot of people saw Reese and said, wow, just one more year, he would have, he probably would have had a great year this year because he's playing with all these great players. But the way, and they're thinking in terms of, oh, he's got 4 years or 5 years to develop. And from Reese's standpoint, it's, shoot, I haven't done, I had a disappointing year this year, and I'm not going to get the opportunities next year to rectify that. I really need to change the scenery. And I think it just makes sense now. And I know fans are very magnanimous with transfers now because everyone benefits and everyone hurts from it. But I think there's still some element of people just like not quite getting yet that these guys really have to kind of make their move or they won't get another shot.
They do. And I think that you said it perfectly, that 7, you put kind of gets it over under on 7.5 in terms of like the number of actual, players that you can have that fit in your program. Anything more than that, you're kind of getting to a water seeking its own level. Nobody wants to be, on the roster past that. Excepting, like you said, for a guy like Hornery, to use a really cross-program, cross-sports analogy, Lou Holtz made a great point. He said, when I had my best teams at Notre Dame, half the roster was All-Americans and half was kids that would kill to play in a Notre Dame uniform.
Right.
And I think that if you're going to fill out your roster, it's going to be with the latter.
Let's look at the next player. So you had Reese left. About Trey White.
Yeah, Trey White, his BPO for the season was 46.8, which is really, really solid for a true freshman. Ranked 6th on the team in BPO 100, 4th in BUSCAR with 80, which is a little bit of the team average of 74. I don't see him as irreplaceable. It just really, from a practical standpoint, it just stinks to see how much time we invested in him and then we don't get the payoff next season. Especially he was fantastic through the I want to say the Washington State game at home, and then boy, he just kind of hit the wall hard. We stuck with him, and it kind of stinks to stick with him, and then he leaves. Not going to fault him. He has to go where he has to do what's best for him, but that's a tough one.
Yeah, I agree. It seemed like a head scratcher to a lot of people, but that is unfortunately the reality of the situation, and him going to Louisville. I mean, one of the worst teams in college basketball last year, one of the worst teams in recent memory. And but they are, Louisville has been in on a lot of players' recruitment in recent months, so they've been going hard after it, and I'm sure their NIL deals are flying fast and furious because Louisville does have a fan base that cares about the sport, so I'm sure they are stepping up and trying to turn things around there. But Trey White, the great thing about Trey White is that I thought he's a very good player, and losing him hurt, but I will say that he didn't have any particularly special skill set that is irreplaceable. And in fact, bringing in DJ Rodman, in essence, pretty much replaces his points and brings some defense where you didn't really see it as much with Trey White, and brings, of course, the savvy veteran experience as well. So for at least that one season, it's potentially an upgrade, but then it's the following season where you might have had Trey White in year 3 where you might feel it. Okay, so now that leaves us Drew Peterson.
Yeah, so Drew's BPO was 51.3, a little bit above the team average. He ranked 3rd. His BUSCAR was 161. He ranked 2nd on the team in BUSCAR. And what's interesting is for Peterson, White, and Waters, all 3 of them, their BUSCAR, their cumulative, ranked higher than their efficiency. So you might wonder, well, what does that mean? Well, to me, I look at that, and as a math guy, I think that, ideally you want your most efficient person to have your highest usage. The fact that basically this is insinuating more usage than efficiency for each 3 of these indicates that their departure, while not the best thing in the world, makes them hardly replaceable and probably presents a pretty good opportunity for better usage of talent.
Well, all right, that covers the players who are leaving. Now let's talk about the players who are coming in. There are 4 new Trojans, starting with point guard Isaiah Collier, who was rated not only the best point guard in the country coming out of high school, but also the consensus #1 overall player. You have Arrington Page, his teammate, who's a 6'9", 6'9.5" power forward, very skilled. You have Bronny James, who everyone has heard of, I'm sure, the son of LeBron James, who is a 6'3" combo guard. And you have DJ Rodman, who is a transfer coming in from Washington State, 6'6" wing, the son of Hall of Fame basketball player from the Chicago Bulls and other teams, Dennis Rodman. So what I'd like to do now is maybe compare some of these incoming players to players we've had in the past at USC under Enfield, preferably, or maybe some other players who played for other teams. First, let's do Isaiah Collier. The way I see Isaiah is that he's a big, strong, athletic kid. Maybe not the most athletic kid, but athletic enough. He's not going to jump out of the gym. I would say he is kind of a Jason Kidd / Baron Davis hybrid, where he is more athletic than Kidd, but maybe not as physical, and he's more physical and savvy than Baron Davis, but maybe not as athletic. How about you?
Well, I want to say Todd Lichty of Stanford. No, I'm joking.
Another blast in the past.
I limited this to the Enfield era for this exercise, and I couldn't come up with one just because, he is such a unique. I mean, you mentioned 2 kids that just, they don't come around every day, and they were really highly recruited. And I believe both of them played just 2 years in college, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's not going to be a lot of comps. I think you nailed it, though. I'm not going to disagree with either of those. I think those are very fair comps.
So let's go on to Arrington Page. And my comparison for him from the Enfield era is a comparison that a lot of people are also making, which is Chimezie Metu, maybe an inch or inch and a half shorter than Chimezie, but like Chimezie, very skilled offensively. And I think he's actually ahead of Chimezie as a freshman coming in from the offensive standpoint. He can shoot with both hands. He can bring it out to three-point land. He's got an array of moves down low. He's got really nice hands. He's got a lot of work to do on the defensive side of things, but he is a definite X factor for the team this year.
Yeah, that was who I thought of as well. But when you said basically where he's a little better than Metu, now this guy didn't have the outside shot, and he's definitely a much better defender than what you described me. But it seems like there's maybe some elements of Onyeka. Is that fair compared to Metu?
Well, I think Page has a better offensive game as far as the refinement. Maybe not as good of a scorer as Onyeka, because Onyeka was arguably the greatest finisher we've ever had at USC down low. If he had the ball down low, he was probably going to dunk it. If he had position, he was going to dunk it or get fouled. And there might have been one time all year in that freshman year of his where he had position down low and in position to either dunk or get fouled. And I think only one time did they actually block the shot. Also, Onyeka had a kind of a very unorthodox offensive game. It's little up and unders, and he didn't really have a proper turnaround. Page has a really refined footwork and does some really kind of graceful things with his shooting. All right, let's go on to Bronny James. I will compare him to a guy from the Enfield era, and I think it's actually a pretty close comparison, DeAnthony Melton. DeAnthony Melton is the white whale of the Enfield era in the sense that he was a 3-star recruit who was grabbed out of the valley without a lot of fanfare. And I remember watching his tape and saying to my friends, hey, this guy is like really good. And I called him Magic Melton because he was like a 6'2" Magic Johnson. You know, he didn't do all the other things that Magic did because he wasn't 6'9", but he did a lot of things to me in a very similar style and just made all these things happen on the court and was a stat stuffer. And, you know, he had that one kind of really intriguing freshman year, and then he was suspended the entire sophomore year, and then he left for the NBA. And I think in the back of the staff's mind is that they are always looking for a player like DeAnthony Melton. Like they would love to have, they will take like a DeAnthony Melton any day of the year, which is why I think they saw Silas Demery and said, hey, this could be our next DeAnthony Melton. Well, I think they might have gotten their DeAnthony Melton with Bronny James, because while Bronny is a much better, I want to say much better, but while Bronny is a significantly better three-point shooter than DeAnthony Melton was as a freshman, they kind of bring a lot of the same things to the table, being good teammates, offering shooting, but also playing defense, tipping balls in the passing lane, blocking shots at a pretty high rate for a guard, and just sort of like making smart moves and never making bad plays or never being in the wrong place, always being in the right place. And to me, I think that's what Bronny is going to bring to the team, exactly the kind of thing that Melton brought to the team. And, you know, Melton averaged about 8 points a game as a freshman. I think that's about what Bronny's going to average.
Yeah, I had two players, you know, that I was drawing a comp to here. One was Melton. The other would be his classmate, Jonah Matthews, in that I think Melton was, you know, I don't know if Bronny will average that much. I just don't know. Matthews was a really good shooter too. Matthews actually wasn't as amazing a defender as Melton was, and I think maybe a more fair defensive comp for Bronny in year one, assuming there's more than a year one, might be Jonah Matthews. You know, I think he might be between the two of them.
Yeah. No, I think it's actually a really good comparison, because if you look at what Jonah brought to the table by his senior season, they're pretty much the types of things that Bronny will bring to the table this year, which are outside shooting, decent ball handling, but not necessarily be your primary ball handler. He can get you out of a game if your point guard is down, perhaps, right? And Jonah was a pretty good defender. He was more of like a good ball defender, whereas DeAnthony was a better off-ball defender. Like he did a lot of things away from the ball that just kind of disrupted the offenses. I think that Bronny's defense is more like Melton's defense, and his offense is more like Jonah's offense. So it's like almost like a combination of the two.
Yeah, it's, I mean, you know, aside from LeBron's obvious skills, just seems to be just an awesome teammate, you know, and a team leader. And I can't imagine that's not just a genetic thing. I think if you're around it every day, you know, and you watch your dad play, you know what it means to be a good teammate.
That's a great point. I mean, having one of the best players in the history of basketball as your teacher, mentor, tutor, this is really mature player. And, you know, DeAnthony Melton was very mature as a freshman as well. I think being able to handle the moment is important when you're a freshman. And I think Bronny James is going to be able to handle the moment. So far, he's shown he can do it, and it'll be easier for him to do it because he's not going to be the guy. So it's going to be, you know, the more and more I've thought about it, the more I'm excited I am about what Bronny can do as a freshman this year. Okay, now let's talk about DJ Rodman and do our comp. So my comp for DJ Rodman from the Enfield era is Isaiah White. From his rather unorthodox sort of set shot three-point delivery to his team defense and sort of being in the right place at the right time and the energy he brings to the table, I think these are pretty good comparisons when you're looking at the Enfield era.
Fair. I think I see that physical resemblance. I'm going to go full-on math nerd here. I know that there's probably some concern about replacing the production of a certain departed player, and I want to massage the agony that is the sciatic nerve of concern about, you know, losing Drew Peterson. Now, you know, physically the games are a bit different, but I just wanted to kind of lay out metrics comparison between the two. And again, this is another thing because I'm reading off a bunch of numbers. If you want to see this in graphic comparison, this will be in the footnote or the podcast footnotes on the website. BPO 100 comparison. Peterson, as I mentioned earlier, was a 51.3. Rodman was actually a 53.2. So Rodman's almost a full 2 points better from an efficiency standpoint. BUSCAR, Peterson was a 161. Rodman was 150. I think Peterson, like you mentioned earlier, was just such a high usage player. So that doesn't really surprise me. It kind of a little surprising that Rodman in so many, so fewer units actually had a BUSCAR that's within range of Peterson.
And I bet you if you break it down just to Pac-12 games as well, Rodman would come out much better because he was among the conference's leaders in three-point shooting in conference games. And I actually like the conference game metric because everyone's playing the same games, same teams.
Exactly.
So you can compare apples and apples. So I think Rodman, when you compare him to almost any player that USC left or is bringing back this year, was probably right up there when it comes to things like three-point shooting and offensive efficiency.
Yeah, he was in total over the whole season. He was, almost 2.5% better than Peterson from three.
Wow.
And actually a better rebounder too, 7.4 per 40 minutes versus 7 for Drew. Even though Rodman's, I think, 2 or 3 inches smaller.
Yeah, I think he's listed at 6'6". I would guess he's, the standard sports information deviation is 1.5 inches at USC, or it was 1.5 inches at USC for many years. But I think other schools, it's probably a little different. I would say he's probably an inch shorter. But everyone's an inch shorter, so it doesn't really matter. So it's not like he's the only one who's an inch shorter, and everyone else suddenly gains an inch on him. So let's just call him 6. He's 6'6". Drew is listed at 6'9".
Probably 6'8".
Yeah, when they do the breakdown at whatever combine he's at, it's going to be. I bet you it's. We'll see if it's 6'8". All right. Well, that's a great look at how some of these incoming players compare to some previous Enfield players. So let's talk about some of the current players and which ones are set for the most improvement next season. Just as a reminder, here are the players that are returning to USC next season from the previous season. You have Kobe Johnson, who will be a junior. You have Vincent Uwuchukwu, who will be a sophomore. You have Oziah Sellers, who will also be a sophomore. You've got Boogie Ellis, who will be a fifth-year senior. You've got Joshua Morgan, who will be a fifth-year senior. Harrison Hornery will be a third-year junior. Kajani Wright will be a sophomore. So, out of those guys, who do you think, based on your analytics and based on the trends that you see when you look at all the data, who do you think has the best chance to make the most improvement?
So I'm going to go large man at the buffet here and pick 3 different dishes. 2 I'll put on one plate. If I look at Oziah and surprisingly Harrison Hornery, interesting that they were actually 4th and 5th on the team in BPO. They didn't play a ton of minutes, but, they got pretty regular, rotations. They'd get 1, 2, or 3 stints per game. I think just one little point on each of them before we get into the deeper dive on the stats. Oziah shot 26.3 on his 3-pointers and over 50% in his 2-pointers. I got to think the 3-pointer is going to come around next season. Just, Enfield laid praise on him that I didn't remember him saying about any true freshman in terms of how good his shooting was. And
he definitely had the stroke. You saw it toward the end of the season. He had 11 points in a game late in the season. The issue with him was he just couldn't get any clean looks at the basket, it seemed. And part of that was just the result of not having a really reliable facilitator on offense in the half court. And, of course, that is an issue that we will likely not have this season. So people like Oziah Sellers have to be licking their chops.
Exactly. And he's just got that spot, at the very minimum, just the backup 3 spot, I think, is just waiting for him to sink his teeth into. He just seems like a natural fit there.
Well, certainly he's going to have his chance. And this is, given how the slow start that he had last season, I feel like he can only go anywhere. There's really not much. I don't think he can get any worse, so to speak. I think as the sample size increases, he's going to get a lot better.
Well, yeah, and we'll come back to just some stats on that in a second on his start in the season last year.
Yeah.
Going to Hornery, because we're going to dig into their stats both at the same time. The one thing I think that sticks out to me for Hornery is I think that his development was really held back last year when, going into the season, I liked our guys, but the roster didn't really, I guess, geometrically make sense. The fact that you had Drew as kind of a 4 who's also running your offense, you really just you didn't really have your 2 bigs, traditional bigs that I think have been a signature of Enfield's best teams. And that scheme didn't change for the most part. So you really just had, just one big spot for the most part. And so I think that Hornery would have had a lot more minutes, a lot more development last season. So just from a non-statistical standpoint, I think that, he's kind of he was ready to make a move. He just didn't have the opportunity because just the pieces didn't line up to facilitate that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's definitely hard when you're not getting the minutes and you're not getting the opportunities. It's hard to really kind of be ready to perform. And there were some times when he did come in and he did perform. So you definitely saw glimpses of quality play from Harrison. So I think he's just kind of a guy who's on standby, ready to come in whenever they need him. And who knows, maybe he'll get a chance to contribute a lot more this season.
When we look at this from a metric standpoint, I went through all the players of the Enfield era, and I grabbed based on minutes for the season and opportunities for the season. All the players that were underclassmen, first of all, and it looked like they were getting, based on their playing time and usage, they were getting like 1, 2, or 3 stints per game to play and show what they have. There were 5 players who had seasons that stood out above everybody else in terms of their BPO. Hornery and Sellers were actually 2 of the top 3 on that list. This really surprised me. Sellers was first on the list. His BPO was 49.0 last season, first among that whole population. Hornery was third at 48.2. Here's who else was on that list, and I really like to give context about what they did later. So second on that list is Khalil Dukes. I don't know if you remember him. He was at the very beginning of the Enfield era.
Yes, I do remember him.
So in 2015, he's second on this list. His BPO was 48.7. He transferred after that season. He wound up at Niagara. At Niagara, his BPO in the 2 seasons there were 52.3 and the 56. So
he did pretty well.
Very well. Basically, he was at Connecticut level, although in the Niagara conference.
Right.
Pretty interesting. Horner, we said, was third on that list. Fourth on the list, Malik Marchetti in 2016.
Right.
I remember seeing him and thinking, wow, this guy just doesn't make mistakes. And I think he only had 1 turnover that season, if I remember correctly. It was crazy. He was solid. He just, didn't have, the opportunities. So he transferred.
He didn't make mistakes, and he didn't make unmistakes.
Okay, fair.
He didn't really do much of anything, is what I remember. I can't really think of any
low usage
signature plays.
Low usage.
Yeah.
But 48.0 was his BPO, which actually would put him, mid pack on this team. He transferred to Louisiana, and there he had a 52.4 BPO. Then in his last season, 51.1, he was injured, and I think that drug his number down a little bit, and he missed the last part of his season. And then fifth on this list is Kobe Johnson, who was a 44.6 in his freshman year. And he jumped to last season to a 53.8. Now,
huge jump.
It is. And I'm not saying that both these guys are Kobe Johnson, but, if I look at the other 3 in that top 5, the fact pattern is there that each of the other 3 made pretty, decent jumps.
So then who is the guy that the metrics say is going to improve the most?
So those 2, Oziah and Hornery, I've got making a good leap just based on the entire body of work for last season. I've got a little different kind of look at it for the guy I'm going to put, on the main plate here. And people might just kind of do a spit take if you're drinking any liquids at this time. Kijani Wright. Yes, Kijani Wright. I know that a lot of people are disappointed in him. I'm just going to basically look at this in terms of two segments. His first 20 games and his last 9 games. Completely different. And to my eye, I kind of saw it, but I didn't see it to the level that the numbers are bearing out here. So Kijani, his first 20 games, his BPO 100 was a 42.8. Last 9 games, that went up to a 57. For reference, for the season, Josh was at 48.8. Best Vince was at 48.6. More context. Our leading BPO for the season was Boogie, and he was at 54. So over this 9-game stretch, 9 games, understand, that was more effective than Boogie in the composite over the whole season from an efficiency standpoint. Now, I need to couch this in a couple of things. He has the backup of doing that often against, or the benefit of doing that often against backups. Very fair. But so did Vince, because Vince wasn't starting for a lot of that time. Small sample size, as you said, so there's not a lot of usage. But I almost want to pound the table here. Something that is so important for freshmen that you see, for example, we didn't see with Trey, is knowing what you can do and knowing what you can't do as a freshman. We see it again and again and again with freshmen. And it just, the light went on for him, and suddenly he figured out, oh, this is what I can do. This is what I shouldn't do. If you remember the beginning of last season, Don McLean on every telecast would say, Josh Morgan should do this. And it's almost like Kijani right after 20 games kind of got that message as a lightning bolt to his head, and he just turned into a different player.
He realized that sometimes you can improve not by necessarily doing things, but by not doing things.
Exactly.
And he figured out that, okay, look, if I get the ball on the post, I'm not very confident in my shot. I don't know if I'm going to get it off. And if I go and shoot, if it doesn't go in, I'm probably going to, be pulled the next time out. So I'm not going to do that. At the same time, I can't just sit here and try to hide.
Yep.
So what can I do that plays to my strengths? And he realized, okay, I think I understand how to play defense now. I think at some point, he's a really smart kid. If you ever heard him talk, he could have gone to Stanford. This is a kid who cares about academics, and he was able to pick up, I think, the defense very well. The light went on at a certain point in the season, and you could see him in some games late, which I can't recall exactly which ones, but he had some stretches where his hedging and everything on defense, all the switching he had to do, and his ability to get back and hold his position down low. He was playing some really good defense, post defense down low, and learning how to use his body. And one of the things he did have great confidence in was his passing out of the post. And I remarked during the season is that one of the things I remarked about during the season is that I think he's one of the best young post passers that I've seen in a while, because if you watch him pass that ball out, those passes, they almost look like they're so crisp and fast moving and precise. You almost think that he was that he just got lucky. He did it enough times. He threw enough of those types of passes where I was like, wow, I guess
right spot. Yeah,
he wasn't just pulling that out of his butt. Those were his real passes. So he could play he learned how to play defense, and he did that, and he was always passing pretty well. And he wasn't a great rebounder, but he did improve, I think, rebounding wise as the season went on. And he finished okay down low. Like when the ball came to him down low, he was able to get the ball off and get the ball into the basket on occasion.
To your point, just to kind of fill in some numbers with what you're saying, exactly right on the rebounding and the blocks. You hit on the offense, which I discussed already. The rebounds per 40 minutes went from 6.6 to 9.3, which is more than Josh over the season and about a half short of peak Vince. Right. The blocks, this surprised me because Kijani's not, he doesn't have Vince's body. So he's got to be smart.
He's a pretty good shot blocker.
He is.
Surprising.
He is. He went from 1.4 per 40 to 3.3 in the last 0.9 games, which is, that's just off Josh's pace of 3.6 and Vince.
Yeah, he had a really nice sequence in the NCAA tournament game against Michigan State that I recall, and I was right there watching it about 20 feet away, and I was really impressed by the timing in his shot block.
Yeah, because he's not 7 feet tall, you can tell he is smart and knows how to use, all of what he has.
Exact. Another example of a smart player and a great teammate to have. He's the guy who's, I don't think they're worried about him leaving, not because they don't think he's going to be good, but because he's not the kind of guy to kind of cut and run, I don't think. For lack of he wants to succeed. He wants to succeed at USC. And if he doesn't succeed at USC, then I think he's got other things going for him.
Clearly. Okay,
to recap, Mark thinks that Kajani Wright is the player who should improve the most from last year into this year, followed by Ozzie Sellers. Is that the next?
Yeah. Yep.
And then Harrison Hornery. And one player we didn't cover is Boogie Ellis. Do you think that he will improve upon his performance last year, or do you think it will just be sort of diluted a bit because of the arrival of Collier? And do you think that maybe he doesn't produce as much, but he's just more efficient?
Yeah, I think he's more efficient. But he won't, a lot won't be asked of him as much in terms of ball handling. The thing that really stood out to me too was like he already had a surprisingly low turnover ratio. He was second on the team behind only Ozzie, which was really surprising for how much he handled the ball last season. I think that, that on the other hand, that kind of limits exactly, how many buckets he can be responsible for since Isaiah's distributing it. But if he can just be more selective and just, not be as tired from handling the ball so much, he could just be scary good. Like, the thing that comes to mind is Khalil Reeves long ago when he was on Arizona. Yeah. He would just sometimes when he would just go into another dimension and he couldn't miss, and he just have these 28 or 30-point games in a matter of moments.
Yeah, I remember a very frustrating thing to be a part of for sure.
Yeah.
Or going back even further, Headache Smith for ASU. Yep. I don't know if you remember that infamous Headache game in the Lions Center of all things, where I believe it was 1993, where I think USC was up by 25 at the half, and ASU came back, and Steven Smith, everything he threw up went in. It was really bizarre. It was very much like Boogie's performance against UCLA this past season. So I think Boogie, he's either gonna. Well, it's not really making much of a prediction to say, look, he's either gonna keep on the trajectory that he's been on and now average 20, 21 points a game, or he'll be in a situation where Collier comes in, sucks up a lot of those points, and he just maybe his point production levels off, but he's doing it at just a really high efficient pace to the point where it just makes us that much of a better team.
And the one thing too, when you talk about him and I think about him coming back, is I wouldn't be surprised if he leaves more in the tank for the postseason, since he had two really rough tournament games. And I think if there's one thing he wants to do more than anything else, aside from just, create himself into an NBA player, is redeem himself in the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of crazy when you think about it, but he would certainly have to go down. I think if you look at the trajectory this team is on and the program is on, if Boogie Ellis has the kind of year we think he's capable of, and if USC has the kind of year we think the team is capable of, then you have to look at Boogie Ellis as one of the all-time great Trojans. And go looking back at his first season at USC, where I think he averaged around 12 points a game, but he was very inefficient and had a lot of the bad habits that he showed at Memphis, and they hadn't yet kind of weeded out of his
absolutely.
play. I mean, who would have thought that 1 year later he would be this all Pac-12 player, but not only just like a marginal all Pac-12 player, like a, probably a top 3 player in the league. And then you have him coming back for another season with an absolutely loaded team that could potentially, I think, reach the Final Four. And it would all be under Boogie Ellis, of all the players, to be the one to finally see it through. And not DeMar DeRozan, not OJ Mayo, not Harold Miner, Boogie Ellis. And that's why the title of this episode is "Who's Ready to Boogie?" I think USC fans are ready to boogie. Okay, now we've talked about the players who've left. We've talked about the players who are coming in. Let's take a quick look at roster construction moving forward and what we will need to replace after this year. I'm just going to list the players who are officially scheduled to return next year. That is Arrington Page, Kobe Johnson, Vincent Iwuchukwu, Bronny James, Osiah Sellers, Harrison Hornery, Kijani Wright. I don't list Isaiah Collier because there's just no way he's going to come back for a second season at USC. We have 7 scholarship players coming back next season. Now, obviously, Bronny James could leave because everyone's talking about him leaving. And I think of the rest of that bunch, as far as declaring for the draft, I think Vincent Iwuchukwu has the potential with a big season to go pro. The rest of them, I think, barring any moves to the transfer portal, are likely to come back. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. The Vince thing is interesting. I think everything else is kind of written in stone. It's one of those, I would call it a high class problem you hope to have. I think if he leaves, it'll be because we had an exceptional season. Right. I can't imagine that if he's good enough to make the NBA that we don't make a really deep run in the tournament.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of it's based on, you look at his size and his skill set and some of the things that he flashed, especially early on in his brief stint last year. I think before he had his back injury, whether it was the Oregon State game when he pretty much carried the team, or some of these moments against Arizona State, which were, to me, he did some things offensively, which I was rather surprised because I didn't think he had that developed of an offensive game.
Yeah, agree. I want to say, I think Mobley came in as the most finished freshman big man that we've had. And yet I think Vince has skills that Evan Mobley didn't.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Evan Mobley was was an incredible athlete. Mm-hmm. Was a kind of is a freak in nature at that position, and his offensive game is developing and still developing. But Vince did things with his footwork that Evan couldn't do as a freshman.
Yeah. So I wasn't the only one seeing that then. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there's no comparison as finishers. I would say Evan is right up there with Onyeka as far as finishing down low, and Vince was not yet to the point where if he's down low with the ball, he's gonna dunk it. And I'm hoping he gets to that point because that would be really nice to have. But other than that, I think offensively he was ahead of both of those guys as a freshman, even if he didn't really get much of a chance to show it.
Yeah. And I think also when I think about Vince, obviously you have the heart issue where he just, he was on I don't want to say accelerated, but a very deliberate path back. Right. And that's going to hurt. And then just, trying to catch up in the middle of the season from, let alone from something like that is so tough, especially because everybody's, got the preseason, the early season rust off. And, you're at a different speed. You're acclimating to the college game as well. You could just see so many times where it's like, he's in position to make a great finish and he doesn't understand that yet. And there's a lob that's perfect for him. And he's just not expecting it. Right. Or, he's got great position, but he's just not expecting a pass that's been made to him. And there's just miscommunications. Or, there's so many things where he's just off a second. You can just see the wheels turning. Just you can almost see him thinking, I'm going to work on this over the summer. And that's not going to happen next season. Yeah,
no, absolutely. This is a guy that's definitely, I think he's definitely a hard charging type of player. And this is, I think, why he was such a big fan favorite. The energy, he just seemed to really bring a lot of energy out the court. And it's rare to see that kind of energy from a big man. Usually it's from a guard, the point guard usually, who brings the energy. And next year there's going to be a lot of energy because Collier is a hard charging downhill battering ram, and Vince is gonna run the court with him and be flying around, and then Kobe Johnson's very emotional and down in the dirt, and so it's going to be a really fun team to watch in that regard. Yeah. So I think looking at the roster next year, you have those guys. We can have this discussion later about Bronny, whether he's going to return or not. I think people who say he's definitely going to go pro after 1 year no one really knows what's going to happen. Look, people say, oh, he wants to play, or LeBron wants to play with his son, and maybe that's true. But he also said his son can do what he wants. Does his son want to play with the dad that much? Maybe he does. Without any information on this at all, just logically, it seems like it's a 50-50 kind of situation rather than a 90-10.
Well, it's not like dad is, only playing 10 minutes a game and scoring 2 points because he's at the tail end of his career.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing, too, is everyone's talking about LeBron having his option coming up where he can basically go anywhere and play, and they can draft Bronny and then he just go play with him as a free agent. So that would be the deal. I don't know. It seems like just a lot of work to go, like a lot of machinations to go through just to play with your son for a year.
Well, or he could sign a 1-year deal and just do it 1 year later, 2 years later.
That's true.
He's kind of winning the battle with Father Time so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so next year with Page, Kobe, maybe Vince, maybe Bronny, Sellers, Hornery, and Kijani Wright back, I think we're going to probably need a combination of two bigs, two ball handler types, whether point guards or whether kind of combo guards, and then two shooting guards / wings. And we have a new roster, or I should say, we have a new target list of recruits that we put up recently at uscbasketball.com. And just some of the names we can talk about real quick from the big standpoint, because potentially USC loses Vincent Uchukwu. They're definitely going to lose Joshua Morgan. So we were looking at people as far as who might have significant minutes. You're looking at Arrington Page, Kijani Wright, maybe Harrison Hornery, depending on how his season shakes out, and potentially Vince back, but maybe he goes. So on that list there's a 7'2" player out of Kansas named John Ball. He's from Sunrise Christian High School in Bel Air. I've seen his tape. He's a very athletic player. He is, another really skilled big man, the kind of guy that infield likes to recruit. But he is one of those guys who is the whole world is after him. He's in Kansas, so obviously Kansas is after him. But USC did make his final 8. So, and then the rest of the bigs on that list are Jacob Kofi, who's out of Washington, Aiden Sherrill, who's out of Michigan, who obviously is Michigan State would seem to have the lead on him, but he did put USC amongst his finalists and is interested in visiting USC. And there was a big man out of Orange County from Sierra Catholic, Sebastian Rancic, who actually took an official visit for USC this past week. He's a 6'10" Croatian, I believe, and just a really skilled big who can pass it and shoot it and rebound it and really finish and run the court. So he's a really exciting player, and I think some of the other teams around the country are starting to get in on him finally, like UCLA. But with USC sort of being the hot team of the moment, maybe there is a chance for us to go in and get him. But if we can get 2 of those 4 bigs or one of those bigs that I just listed, and then maybe get a transfer from the portal as a big, that would be great for USC. Then you have Trent Perry from Harvard Westlake in LA. He's a point guard, very high priority for USC. He recently visited. From what I've heard, he's very high on the Trojans, and I think that of all the guys who might have a chance to commit early, he could be one of them. You've got Taj DeGorville, who's out of Las Vegas. He is from Durango High. He's another 6'4" combo guard. It appears that USC just recently offered him, so he is another potential player to come in as a ball handler. Then you have Jace Richardson, who's also from Las Vegas. He plays for Bishop Gorman, which, of course, is where Charles O'Bannon played. Jace Richardson, as some of you might remember, Jason Richardson of Michigan State from the early 2000s, really athletic wingman. He is the son of Jason Richardson. So, but again, it's a situation where Michigan State definitely is recruiting him, but he's kind of a West Coast guy, and he's definitely interested in USC as well. And then USC just offered Bishop Boswell out of North Carolina. He's another ball handler. And then, so 2 bigs, 2 ball handlers. I would say out of the ball handlers that I mentioned, probably Perry and DeGorville at this point are the 2 most likely. And then USC probably needs 2 shooting guards or wings. And from that group right now, we are going after Isaiah Elohim. He is from Sierra Canyon. Of course, that is where Bronny James went to school. It is where Kijani Wright went to school. Word on the street is that LeBron pretty much controls all the guys that come out of Sierra Canyon. And so, maybe he'll throw us a bone and bring Isaiah Elohim to USC because he is one of the top players in the country, a 5-star recruit next class. Then you have Victorious Miller, who's playing at Compass Prep down in Arizona, or Compass High in Arizona. He's originally from California. He is the son of Little Romeo, or not the son of, he is the nephew, or he's related to Little Romeo, let's just say, who played with DeMar DeRozan back, who came to USC with DeMar DeRozan back in 2009. So he is probably one of the players who, again, is USC has a really good chance of getting if they really apply themselves. Also in that group is Zoom Diallo from up in Washington. You have Liam Campbell from Idaho area, and then Tyrone Riley, who is from Downey. So I think USC needs 2 bigs, 2 ball handlers, and 2 wings. Isaiah Elohim and Victorious Miller on the wings, Trent Perry and Taj DeGorville at the ball handlers, maybe Sebastian Rancic and a transfer guy coming in. That would be a really nice haul, 5 new players. And then, of course, maybe if other players leave, you have to fill things in with the transfer portal. But it looks like USC recruiting is off to a great start for 2024. I think right now USC is one of the hot schools in recruiting. It remains to be seen what's going to happen with the kind of the Bronny effect. I think one of the hopes, has to be one of the hopes of the program, is that with Bronny coming in, bringing visibility, it kind of raises USC's profile even more on the recruiting front. And of course, with the Clutch Sports connection that LeBron has, maybe some of these players can decide that, hey, might as well go play that 1 year in LA before I, start working out in LA for my draft combine. So any thoughts on this recruiting list, Mark?
The only thing is 2 and 2 and 2 is 6. So I think where you're saying 2, I'd probably put the totals more at 1.5 and hope that we get like 4 in total. I just wonder if we oversign, if that kind of hits that concept. Go ahead.
Well, I'm assuming that of the 7 that I've listed that are going to return, between Vince and Bronny, one of those guys is going to be gone. I would just say. Okay. And maybe there's one other guy who transfers, just because that's just how college basketball is now. Maybe Harrison Horney graduates and says, I'm just going to go play my last year somewhere. Or maybe Isaiah Sellers doesn't have as good of a year as he hoped this year, and he's like, I need to go somewhere else.
Okay, you bite your tongue on that, okay.
But yeah. Or maybe Kobe Johnson has a great year. Maybe he shoots 45% from 3-point range and is the defensive player of the year in the Pac-12, and he goes pro. So we have 7 guys, who could return next year, and I wouldn't bet on all 7 returning, I guess is what I'm saying. So we will probably need some combination of 5 to 6 recruits coming in to get back to 11 or 12 players. So that is my thoughts on recruiting. I'm really not worried about recruiting too much, but it's really fun to watch now in basketball because USC has really sort of entered this phase where it can go in across the country and bring in elite players, and that's kind of exciting to see.
Yeah.
And on that note, that is a wrap for the first episode of the Dunk City podcast. A big thanks goes to Mark Backstrom for helping me get this show off the ground. Thank you to everyone who listens and reads on the website, and we hope you join us again in the future. Fight on.